This week on the Hollywood in Toto podcast, we look ahead at 2025 and what movies will be gracing movie screens across the country. And is superhero fatigue going to take down the Man of Steel? Have to wait and see. We also talked to filmmaker Stephen McGee about his amazing new film called Resurgo Detroit. It's a labor of love to the nth degree. Took 20 years to make it possible. And just maybe it'll coincide with the Detroit Lions Super Bowl victory. You never know. And Whitney Cummings ends 2024 in style. And by style, I mean by absolutely eviscerating CNN. It is a thing of beauty. And of course, it's very, very funny. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
Well, it's officially 2025, and we might see a few sequels, remakes, prequels, reboots coming our way sooner than later. I listen, I'm going out on a limb. I know Hollywood rarely goes down that path, but that's where we're probably headed in the next few months. And so I want to give you a little bit of a sneak peek at what's coming our way, both sooner and then later. On the sooner front, we've got Captain America: Brave New World. Now, this one's got tons of buzz, and pretty much all of it's bad. I don't want to say it's Madam Web adjacent, but boy, there is a little bit of overlap there when it comes to the pre-release lack of hype. Of course, this is Anthony Mackie taking over for Chris Evans as the Star-Spangled Avenger. And like we said, there's been lots of reshoots, lots of interesting comments coming out of the blogosphere when it comes to this particular movie. And curiously enough, it arrives in theaters on Valentine's Day, February 14th, because when you think about Valentine's Day and love and romance, you think about grown men in lycra tights. So what a natural fit. But, looking ahead a little further down the line, there are lots of sequels coming our way. Of course, we're going to get Wicked, the Good, the second and hopefully final chapter of that little mini franchise. Now, I really enjoyed the first Wicked, but I think you need to wrap up the story and not stretch it out any further. But I think that's exactly what the plan is. We're going to have more and more sequels. We're going to have more superhero films, including Thunderbolts. I don't even care about this movie. I've seen the cast. I've seen the trailers. Not exactly sold. And we'll have to see if audiences are sold. I mean, the MCU brand was once bulletproof, but now not so much. I think one of the more anticipated films, again, it's a sequel, but, hear me out. It's called 28 Years Later. Of course, that's the second film, the second sequel in that particular franchise, which started with 28 Days Later with Cillian Murphy. That was a terrific zombie movie. It almost kind of rebooted the whole genre, making it possible for all the things we've seen in recent years, including The Walking Dead. Now, you could say it's a sequel. Why did they wait so long? I understand all of that, but if you take a glimpse of that trailer, it is creepy. Absolutely.
7, 6, 11, 5, 9 and 20 miles today, 4, 11, 17, 32 the day before. Boot, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war.
Absolutely mesmerizing. And I don't know if the movie can be anywhere near as good, but when you make movies like that and you have a killer trailer, I guarantee the opening weekend's going to be huge. I mean, that's really how you sell a movie these days. I mean, the buzz is great. The pre-release hype, perfectly fine. Maybe it's an anticipated movie, but if you can put together a absolutely killer trailer, that is everything in the marketplace right now. It's one of the reasons why the Ghostbusters film from 2016 was such a flop, because that trailer sucked, period. Even though we were told that we hated women if we felt that way.
Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur.
Other films coming our way will be interesting as well. I actually want to focus more on the spirit of Hollywood right now than the actual blow-by-blow movie tally, because I do feel like the industry is changing. I think we're seeing more and more films which are more entertainment-based, less lecture-based. I mean, even Disney, the face of woke Hollywood has been backpedaling pretty significantly in recent months. We've seen movies like Inside Out 2 and Moana 2 really politically free stories, just entertaining, just good for the whole family. No messages, no inappropriate characters that you'll have to talk to your kids about afterwards. I mean, they finally got the message. And I think Hollywood in general is heading in that direction as well. And there'll still be woke movies and they'll still be progressive at times. And that's perfectly fine. They can do what they want. But if you want to have a large audience, if you want to bring back all the money necessary to pay back the budget and the marketing, you just can't go with that. Let's leave those films maybe to the indie ranks at times where the risk is much less and you can just basically do what you want and maybe appeal to a smaller audience that may be ready to lap up that kind of material. Another film that's coming away, which I'm really curious about, and it might be the most controversial film of 2025. That's my place, my bets down right now. It's called Michael. And of course, the Michael in question is Michael Jackson. Now, this one is being made with the approval of the Jackson estate. And that is a red flag because it means they're probably not going to go too heavy into the allegations against him as far as child sex accusations. Now, of course, we never really know the truth of that. It's one of the biggest scandals in music history. Was he guilty of doing all the things that some people said he was guilty of doing? He's obviously passed. We won't get to hear more from him. It feels like the cases against him have died down. I mean, I think we'll never know. But if you're making a Michael Jackson biopic and you don't really deal with that story head on, I think you're doing everyone a disservice. So we'll have to wait and see if people will just put that aside and enjoy seeing Michael on the screen in some capacity again, if the music will win us over, or if people would just say, you know what? I love his music, but I'm just too creeped out to see his life story on the big screen. So that's maybe the biggest controversial movie of the year, maybe the biggest question mark. It could be huge or it could be a flop. And, we've seen in recent years movies based on other key figures not do so well. Whitney Houston's biopic was an absolute dud. Amy Winehouse, that one flopped as well. More recently, the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown, doing much better, but certainly not a blockbuster by any sense of the word. So Michael, coming soon, coming in the fall, maybe in time for Oscar season. Maybe they want to get some buzz that way, but it's going to be interesting. The past year had 9 out of 10 of the top 10 movies were sequels and reboots and prequels and remakes. I mean, that's just the way Hollywood rolls right now. And the one film that was an original story was Wicked. And of course, that's not really even an original story. It's a Broadway adaptation. Close enough, certainly true, but we are addicted to the tried and true. We are addicted to comfort food. We are addicted to sequels. And as I've been saying a lot on social media and here as well, that's on us. We could yell at Hollywood. We can say, we need more original films. Why are you giving us so many sequels? Well, because we line up for them, because the IPs involved bring fannies into the theaters. And until that changes, you're going to get many, many, many more sequels and remakes and reboots, including a Jurassic World reboot coming our way soon with Scarlett Johansson. But I want to end with one little caveat here, because again, it is up to us to dictate what Hollywood gives us. So if you see a movie this year that is original and fresh and different and most of all good, well, why don't you work as a one-person marketing team for it? Spread the word on social media. Tell your friends and neighbors, old school, word to mouth really does matter. And let's push some of this energy that we have in that direction. And that way we may see more original stories. I mean, we're never going to get rid of sequels. And listen, I'm okay with that. Some sequels are just flat out wonderful. And some just make us feel good. Watching that recent Beverly Hills Cop sequel, Axel F., it wasn't a great film, but boy, it just felt great to see those characters back again, to see Eddie Murphy doing what he does best. And of course, it was pretty good on its own. Certainly wasn't as good as the original, the source material, but sequels do serve a place in Hollywood. We want to see these stories extended. We want to see our favorite characters again. That's fine. But I think we all have it within ourselves to push forward to get more enthusiasm for original stories. And once we do that, Hollywood will make it. I know Hollywood can be stubborn. I know Hollywood can maybe not listen to all the cues we give it. Look how long it took Disney to kind of wake up and say, hey, maybe woke storytelling wasn't a good idea. But they will eventually get the message and give us more of what we want. So that's 2025 in a nutshell. More sequels, more remakes, but there will be some good things sneaking through the cracks as well. And it's up to us to help shape the Hollywood future. Let's make Hollywood great again. We should probably put that in a hat. Here's a Hollywood truism. Documentary filmmakers are not in it for the money, not at all. Yeah, occasionally you get a Michael Moore, a Dinesh D'Souza, an Alex Gibney who really find significant success with documentary films, but for the most part, many, many more filmmakers work in relative obscurity. They don't get their names in the lights. They don't get millions of dollars for doing what they do, and they certainly have to scramble for every penny to make sure their films get finished and get presented to the public. It ain't easy. Indie films struggle mightily even with big stars attached. It is 10 times as hard for documentary filmmakers, which is one of the reasons why I want to have Stephen McGee on this show right now, because
Detroit is the comeback story of this century.
Detroit's the city of champions.
This is Detroit, Michigan.
When I explain Detroit, there's this thing that you have to wear on your back.
now, because Stephen, an award-winning filmmaker, decided to make a film about Detroit. Now, he's not a native, but he did move there 20 or so years ago, and he thought, wow, this is an amazing city, and we seem to be undergoing a rebirth of sorts. Wouldn't it be wonderful to get it all on screen and make a story out of it? And that's exactly what he did. His film is Resurgo Detroit. It is a documentary. It is coming out in 2025. And when we were recording this particular conversation, there was a chance it might get on the short list for Best Documentary Feature within the Oscars. It didn't make that list. That's a shame, but it will be coming out in the near future. And it's certainly not a slam against the movie, which sounds wonderful. I can't wait to see it. And the buzz on this one is all good. Now, I heard about the film through a friend on LinkedIn. You know how crazy our digital world is. Sometimes you get wonderful leads and wonderful little tips from all sorts of different places, like LinkedIn. And as soon as I heard about what Stephen was up to and how many sacrifices he made to get this movie finished, I thought, yeah, I want to have him on the show. So here he is, the first new episode of 2025, Stephen McGee, the director of Resurgo Detroit. And you know what? Wouldn't it be amazing if this movie comes out in the near future, which it will, at roughly the same time, or maybe even shortly thereafter, the Detroit Lions win a Super Bowl? That would be the ultimate companion piece for this particular film, because Detroit deserves a close-up. And whether it's at the Super Bowl or on the big screen, it's going to get it. So here's my conversation with Stephen McGee, the director of Resurgo Detroit. Well, Stephen, thanks for joining the show. There's nothing I like more than a labor of love, and I think you are the definition of labor of love. This project you've been working on, Resurgo Detroit, literally 20 years. Give us a taste of when this began, and then we can get more specific about the journey and obviously the finished product.
Yeah, I was traveling the world as a parachute journalist, early 2000s, dropping into these beautiful people's lives that were on the front line of change: Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe. But I was only there for a couple of days, and I wasn't able to actually get into the story. And country after country, year after year, I began just seeing some of like the deepest levels of the human experience. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, going to some of the ruins like the Acropolis, the Parthenon, Angkor Wat, and all of that travel, I was almost killed a couple times in just these insane situations. And I got back to California and I just wondered about purpose. And I was like, what is my life about? Am I actually making the difference I'm here to make? Mm-hmm. And, the next day, the Detroit Free Press called. I mean, I was on the beach. I had a 1962 Chevy pickup. It was beautiful, but my camera didn't want to raise in any of those situations I was in. And I moved sight unseen in 2005 to Detroit. And that kind of prepared me, all that travel prepared me to get into a city that was very misunderstood, full of ruins, but full of people that I wanted to get to know.
And imagine, as an outsider of sorts, you had a fresh perspective. You can kind of start with a blank canvas. It sounds like you kind of fell in love with the city, with flaws and all, pretty quickly. What was it about Detroit at the time? Because back then it wasn't what it is today. What struck you about the city?
Yeah, even just telling people in California in the film business that I was leaving the state to start my film career just kind of put people's minds. I was at Brooks Institute of Photography in Ventura. Fantastic people like that director of National Geographic and Michelle McNally from the New York Times. Beautiful people that knew the industries, but coming into Detroit, I instantly felt like I'm being ingrained. No longer am I a parachute journalist, but I'm living inside my story. And in 2005, like the landscape was full of ruins, just like these massive monuments to some of the best architecture this country's ever seen, but empty ruins. And I knew that it wasn't a zip code problem. I kind of saw it as a status of our country not making as much as we used to. A slow decline from the 1950s funneled into what this landscape was and had become. And so part of my lens was shifted towards exploring these abandoned ruins, just like the Acropolis,
Yeah.
but in America. And then the other part was shifting the lens away from that to see the people and the beautiful life that they had to create inside of a failed government, inside of a failing city, where almost every major institution had pulled back, from the opera to the police to the firehouses. I mean, like literally the entire city was on the brink of shutdown and then eventually did.
Now, along this journey, you start to sense, I imagine, sooner than later, that there is a comeback story happening in real time. Obviously, you couldn't know the future. What did you see on the ground that made you think, this city's coming back? There's something here that will not be stopped.
Well, it's an interesting thing because part of my tagline in defining the film that I eventually ended up condensing into 2 hours after 20 years was that this idea of a comeback was really rooted from an outside perspective of financial investment. And so what we see today is a beautiful, like $10 billion worth of work from Dan Gilbert's downtown. He's brought back 100 buildings. I work with Bill and Lisa Ford, and they've put $1 billion into the building in front of my house. So these things have been lifted up, but the foundation of the city are a Black population that have really just grown from 1910 onward and have been this hidden narrative that have opened their lives to me in a way where they want the world to know the stories. And so a lot of Detroiters actually say it's not a comeback narrative. Detroit never left. So then in my mind, I'm a middle child, so I want everybody to talk. And so I'm like, well, if this is the greatest comeback of this century, which I think it is,
Yeah.
it began in the people who never left. Like a bunch of buildings aren't going to make me move to a city, like honestly, but the people here are incredible. Block after block, people that own 2 or 3 or 5 homes, they're creating just the most innovative elements because homes for $20,000 to $30,000. Growing up in California, that's impossible. Like literally, I bought my house for $1, and so that kind of narrative arc goes through this story of kind of the collapse of an empire, the collapse of industry, like cities that have these single industry cells, like tech in San Francisco or Hollywood in LA, or Detroit was the auto industry. When they pull out, like what's left and what does that look like?
Now, you're a storyteller, you're an artist, and you're also, I'm sure, on some significant level, rooting for the comeback or rooting for the resurgence.
Yeah.
Do you, as a director, lean into that and make it more personal with the film, or is there's a sense where you have to detach yourself and say, "Hey, I know I have some feelings here, but I need to be a storyteller and an observer first and foremost."
Absolutely. As a journalist, you get a byline to say, like, I've worked with the New York Times, I've worked with the Wall Street Journal, I've worked with all these people, and you're on the outside you just bring your camera up, and like that's as much influence you have on the scene as possible. I tried to write myself out of the script so many times, but the Detroiters that I knew kept on encouraging me as a white outsider to include myself as this kind of like opportunity for people on the outside to get into the city just like I was able to. And at the same time, my producer Jessica Care Moore was born and raised here. Her dad is part of this up south movement that I was never taught in school, but is a massive part of why we are where we are today and the strengths that we have today. And she's Detroit's poet laureate. She's incredibly like renowned in the poetry scene, and that duality. We've collaborated on about 12 Detroit films to this date. When Amazon was trying to get their second world headquarters, when Amazon was trying to win its world headquarters, Dan Gilbert reached out to me and asked me to make a film, and I had just worked with Big Sean, the rapper, and so working with Jessica Care Moore was the only way to bring that to a new level. And I had just won $170,000 worth of film gear through NAB, that event in Las Vegas. uh, Red, the camera company, Shot Over, which is a gimbal that goes on the front of a helicopter. Fujinon, some of these like iconic industry brands selected me out of thousands of filmmakers to just continue doing what I was going to do, but with that gear. And so 2017 was this kind of really interesting mark in my life where, my cameras that were like breaking, my tripod legs were breaking, everything was breaking. And then I was just handed this like massive tool set, and then working with her to try and win Amazon's headquarters, all of that just kind of built into where we are today. And it's just been a blitz for the past 6 years to get this film done.
Gotcha. We have kind of a mutual connection. It's a LinkedIn story for another day. But he was telling me that in a way, through this process, you've kind of bucked convention or sort of maybe avoided conventional tips or wisdom on how to bring a film to fruition. Can you talk a little bit about that and sort of following your own muse and your own instincts?
I have massive respect for anybody out there uh, doing what they love and following whatever's inside of them. And that's, to me, it was a lot less of like going against traditional means. But for sure, I understand that when you build a film, it's best to create an audience, go to the festivals, go to these traditional routes, because it works. It's like it gets your audiences. There's fantastic people like Tom Powers out there who are pushing docs forward because story is most important thing. Story is king right now. At this time in my life, personally, spiritually, emotionally, I mean, I was waking up at 3 a.m. to edit until 7 a.m. and then getting the kids off to school, at 7:30 and coming back and editing all day. I had an assistant editor. I've turned down most of the funding that people have come to me with because it's just such a crucial story. And I mean, I don't really ever script anything. So nothing in my life is really ever scripted. It's all like shoot the content and then make it the best it can be in the post. And I'm doing all of the posts. I'm checking the captions. I'm doing all this kind of stuff. And that works for a 3-minute film, but when it comes down to 2 hours and 20 years, it really took a lot to get to that moment. But just kind of like swinging around the moon, once you're in that orbit, I just couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if my camera's working correctly. Is it working all right?
I'm seeing a freezed image, but it's possible the feed is better. I don't know, but we'll just go with it. Your sound clear as a bell. So,
Okay, yeah, I was going to show you a little bit about the studio I was in. But maybe it's not, maybe that's not supposed to be right now. Uh,
but
but yeah, so the studio even that I'm in is this kind of Rubik's cube of my brain, where I was able to kind of take these like overall arching story arcs that I was able to see and witness through 20 years and be able to start to break them down into these larger narrative arcs that had to just find the simplicity of its core. So the collapse of industry, the $1 house, this Detroit narrative from the inside perspective, and start weaving those into a traditional 2-hour film. And once I was getting around the corner of that, the Detroit Lions kept on winning, and I was like, man, if the Lions go to the Super Bowl, like I feel like this film should be out in the world. And it's not that I didn't want to go through the festivals. I've still submitted to all the festivals, but there was an opportunity in my life where I looked at my daughters and I looked at my wife, and I was like, if we submit right now, and the story in the heart of this film, which is based on the strength of our country, can actually make a difference in this country right now, in a time where I see it's needing to be. I don't know why I'm getting emotional thinking about that, but we need to submit right now.
Yeah.
And there were some key members who have done this process a couple times, also big names in the industry that also supported this idea of submitting versus waiting a year. And if one person inside of the academy can get moved by it, I trust the process. I trust the 680 or however many, I don't know if I actually can say that, however many academy members there are.
Yeah.
I just trust the process. And and at the same time know that there's incredible stories out there that, any one of them should take that stage, right? And so it's not to me about the stage I get to, it's about wherever I stand, lifting up the voices I have access to.
Yeah. Well, real quickly, I know that the Oscar situation with documentaries is a little bit odd. It doesn't seem, I mean, you just think, okay, you just look at the Oscar, you look at the films and the best ones are selected or nominated. But with documentaries, it's a little trickier, right? Can you just give us a quick lowdown on what that situation is? Because you have to be sort of a finalist before you become one of the nominees.
Yeah, so the Oscar process that I am understanding through the rules is you have to qualify. And if you want to learn how to qualify, you can look online for that. But then once you meet the qualifications, 169 films met the qualification this year. And this week they're choosing the shortlist, which is 15, and all that's
Right.
public information. And so yeah, I mean, I don't have the big names of a distribution house. I don't have the millions of dollars for advertising, but the teaser, we released the teaser on Thanksgiving Day. It was shared around 12,000 times. It has 600,000 views, 99% positive comments, and I feel like the world's ready for this film. So
Yeah.
if we make that short list, it's going to be crazy, and if it's not, I still got the city behind me.
That's right. That's the main thing. Listen, we'll have our fingers crossed for you. And by the way, I know this is coming out in 2025 officially, but is there a chance for a last minute edit if the Lions do what we think they may do?
My goodness, man, we can't even talk about that. Like, look, there's people that have spent their lives on a single story, um, I thought I could be like 80 one day. I'm 42 now. I have 3 daughters, a wife who travels the world for BMX. We're a mom and pop shop. We're as independent as they get. And I was like, man, if the Lions get in the Super Bowl, that would be insane. And then I'm like, but like, should I wait for flying cars? Like, is that what I'm like, at the same time, you know, 20 years of content, like literally I have enough footage and photos. I have 3 million photographs, thousands of hours of footage, and stories that just, that I don't see represented in the world today. So I actually already have my next 2 hours ready for an edit. So it could just be the beginning of the next film.
Absolutely. Listen, awards are nice. Oscar glory would be amazing, but the story is a story. The rebirth is what it is. And you've touched, I'm sure, countless lives with your process, with your heart, with your camera. And we wish you all the best. We'll be following the journey of the film. And of course, this will be out in 2025, Resurgo Detroit. And thank you so much for taking the time to share your everything with us, because it does matter. And I love talking to storytellers who lead with their passion. And I couldn't describe that in any more accurate way when it comes to your story.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if people want to see more about the project, they can go to thedetroitfilm.com.
Excellent. Thanks again.
I-
You gotta love it when comedians speak truth to power. No, I don't mean Stephen Colbert saying his latest Orange Man bad joke. That's the opposite. That's as stale as something you'll find in a bakery garbage dumpster. It's been there, heard that, didn't laugh the first time. I'm talking about people like Whitney Cummings. Now, she's a veteran comedian. She's been on the scene for a while. And CNN had the interesting fortune to invite her on their New Year's Eve telecast. Why not? She's funny. She's fresh. She's got interesting insights into the world. But boy, they didn't quite know what she was going to say that particular evening. Now, there's so many interesting elements of this particular story, and I want to share a glimpse of what she said in a moment. But just know the people behind the scenes at CNN, and certainly the anchors on screen, must have been absolutely gobsmacked to hear that was what was coming out of her mouth. And I think the funniest part of all is that throughout her random roasting, she kept saying, "Am I still on the air? Is this okay? Are you guys all right?" Because she knew how rare it was to say what she said, how you don't hear these kinds of conversations on TV. It's certainly not on CNN. I think for many CNN viewers, this might be the first time they've heard some of these comments, and they are a doozy. Trust me.
2024 election fried our brains. The Democrats couldn't hold a primary because they were too busy holding a body upright. Are we still rolling? Am I off?
Go for it.
It was amazing that the pro-choice party didn't give their voters one when it came to the presidential candidate. Kamala was forced on us so hard you'd think she was patented by Pfizer or Moderna, whichever one's, oh God. Andy just gave me a very scary look.
No!
Pretty amazing, right? And I think one of the things that's noteworthy about 2025 is that the roast is back. Now, that was sort of an unofficial roast for sure, but just a few months ago, we saw a roast of Tom Brady where basically anything went. Anything. It was bruising. The sharpest elbows you'll hear in the comedy circuit, well, That's what happened there. And there was no outrage. There was no blowback, no apology tour, no hashtag campaign trying to get that particular show canceled. The page is turning. The woke mob is receding. And we saw more proof of that just a few days ago with Torching 2024, another roast that happened on Netflix. Boy, that one was even harder and tougher than the Tom Brady roast, including Tim Dillon, who I think is terrific. He dressed up as the slain CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, pretending he was in hell and still conducting his business of healthcare management. I thought it was tasteless. I didn't think it was funny. But you know what? That was a roast. That's what you do on a roast. No rules. Anything goes. And for some people, it was probably wildly hilarious. And some people, it was just absolutely tone deaf and tasteless. But that's what a roast is. And you enjoy the roast jokes you enjoy, and you take the ones you don't and push them aside. That's comedy. That's comedy without a net. And I think we're getting back to that right now. So all we need really is a few big screen comedies, R-rated, bawdy, outrageous, but with a nice big beating heart at the center. That would make 2025 extra special. I don't know if we'll get it yet. Might have to wait till 2026. But boy, that is on the Hollywood to-do list. If it's not, it should be, because that's what we need right now. So good for Whitney Cummings. I guess good for CNN for letting her on the air. But by the way, when they did a highlight reel of their New Year's Eve coverage, somehow Whitney's comments were left on the cutting room floor. I'm not surprised, but that's funny too.
But they are objectively hilarious.
Well, that's it for the show this week. Thank you to Radio America for having me as part of their great podcast lineup. And if you have a chance, if you could tell a friend about the show, if you could like or subscribe wherever you're watching us, it could be on Rumble or YouTube or listening on iTunes or other finer podcast platforms. I hope you will give us a share, tell a friend. It helps spread the word, and we do appreciate it. Those evil algorithms strike again. And you know what? If you like something, just share it along. That'll always defeat the algorithms. And I appreciate all your support. Super excited about 2025. There will be more videos. There'll be more episodes. There'll be more bonus installments and some other things I have planned that I think you're going to like. I feel like 2024 was just getting my feet wet, getting this channel up and running. But now we're off to the races. So I will see you all next time.